Good morning, guys and ladies. I hope everyone is having a wonderful start to their week. Um, if y'all see me fiddling around in my chair, I've already told Mr. Steve offline that I may have broken my tailbone. I'm maybe over exaggerating the breaking, but I have boogered my rear end up playing basketball, getting fouled, and going right to the floor. So if y'all see me moving around, I apologize. I'll try and keep that to a minimum, but I am in some great pain today. But we are joined today for our part two with Mr. Stephen Schofield. Part one will be linked in the show notes, but he wrote a book about his career with not only SF and SOG, but his time in Laos. And today we're going to be talking about his time in Laos because we covered a great deal of his SOG career in part one, and we just started getting into Laos in part one. So we wanted to cover part two. He's going to be talking about how he even got there. We're going to be going over some gear. Excuse me. And then Mr. Steven is very tied in, considering he worked very closely with this brave group of people, the Hmong. He's going to be speaking about the Hmong at length with us today, so he can educate us on them. So before I talk too much, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Mr. Steve. Hope you're doing well today, Mr. Steve, and the floor is yours, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I after I got back to Okinawa from Vietnam, I got a letter from Don Dugan, who was working for USAID in Laos, and he had known my senior medic in Vietnam, Doug Hardy, and asked Doug Hardy to come to Laos to work for USAID. Doug said he could not; he had to return back to the States and didn't want to go to Laos, and he recommended me. And then Don Dugan said, if you're good enough for Doug, you're good enough for me. And that's how it all started. And so I said, yes, I'd like to come to Laos work for USAID. And he said, well, Don said it takes a while. So I extended in Okinawa for 4 more months, ended up going to the Philippines for a couple of those months. And finally, I got a letter from Don saying, yeah, USAID's going to hire you. Take your discharge, go back home. So I did that, and I discharged and went back to Chicago and waited to hear from USAID. I had to go through another top secret security clearance, which I guess took some of that time, but returning to Chicago in May, and it was August before I heard from USAID, and USAID said, report to Washington, you're hired, basically. So I got to Washington, and I was in a class of about 14 people there for about 2 weeks. And it was just paperwork, getting a diplomatic passport, an American Express card, some briefings. I was not a typical USAID employee at that time. The rest of this crew were going to different missions around the world. So right before the end of my 2 weeks, I was pulled out of the class for about a half day, and I got my top secret briefing, which was that I was to run the village health program in northern Laos, which was run by USAID Public Health Division. But my top secret duty was to train SGU, Special Guerrilla Unit medics, and to perform search and rescue for downed and allied air crews. So that was the top secret part of the mission. So I arrived in Laos, carried my Browning high power in my briefcase on the airplane, loaded over to Laos, and got to Vientiane, met Don Dugan. He showed me around a bit. I had to do some more paperwork and processing. So I was in Vientiane for 3 days. Next, I'm up in Santong, ready to go to work. And Stan Mani, another medic, he was an Air Force paracommando. He showed me around Samtong, Longchen, those areas. And that took about 2 or 3 days. And then I started work. And work was that I had about 100 medics and 70 dispensaries all over northern Laos. And they were primarily Hmong. Majority were Hmong. A smaller percentage were Lao Tung, which were equivalent to Montagnards in Vietnam. And they're now known as Khmu. At that time, the Hmong were known as Mao and now known as Hmong. Anyway, then we had a few, very few upland Lao medics working. So my day-to-day job was to take supplies out to these dispensaries and usually load a porter with enough for 3 dispensaries and make a land at the dispensary, meet with the medic, check on what he was doing, give him some on-the-job training, check his records, check his medical supplies, and then resupply him. Then move on to the next. And after those 3 dispensaries, go back to Sam Tong, load the airplane up, and do it again. So I'd probably make 15 to 20 takeoff and landings a day. And that was how I operated the whole time I was in Sam Tong. Now, the Hmong were very primitive people. They were animistic, slash and burn farmers, and they believed in spirits or P, good spirits, and Dab, the evil spirits. And they had no written language until the very early 50s when a French priest developed a Romanized alphabet, popular alphabet. Yeah, Romanized popular alphabet. So here was a people that had no written language until the 50s. And they, again, everything was based on family and clan. Clan came first. There was a lot of inter-clan rivalries. There was the difference between the green and white Hmong. But anyway, we made the operation work. So after Sam Tong fell in March 1970, we moved to Bon Son. And there we had a big warehouse, probably hundreds of $1,000s worth of medicine there. And here I was, 24 years old, thought I was hot shit, been ex-special forces. And now I'm responsible for working with training these 100 or so medics. Previously in the Army, I'd probably only largest unit I commanded was a squad. So anyway, it was a learning experience. I thought I was pretty sharp, but again, here I was just a kid. For example, Don Dugan was probably late 30s, early 40s. And most of the people that I worked with were older than I was, especially Pop Buell, who was the area coordinator for Military Region 2. And he was quite a guy, a former Indiana farmer, came over to Laos with the International Voluntary Services, and then went on to USAID and was the area coordinator for Military Region 2, which was Xinjiang and Huapan provinces. And this was the same area, Region Military 2, that was commanded by General Von Powell. So after we went to Bon Son, I then ended up with 2 aircraft daily. I had a Pilatus Porter and a Jet Ranger. So I preferred to travel in the Jet Ranger and then move most of the supplies by Porter. Some of my medics were very good. I mean, I had a good medical supervisor by the name of Lee Chai, and he was my right-hand man. We traveled everywhere together. Because I'd only been in Vientiane Chen 3 days, I had no Lao language, no training. I was just thrown in there. So I had to use an interpreter. And most of the time, we were dealing with Hmong, which was a difficult language, more difficult than Lao. At any rate, so Lee Chai was my right-hand man. And then we had 3 other medics that were called the supervisors. And 2 of them were Hmong, Li Dang and Lo Vang. And then we had the 3rd one, whose name was Nun Chanita. And he was a Khmu or Lao Tung, and also the same basic ethnicity as the Montagnards in Laos. And he was a very sharp young guy. And both Slovang and Townum are still alive. Of all those senior medics, those two are still alive. In fact, I met with Lovan last Memorial Day in Sheboygan at the Lao Hmong and American Veterans Memorial. Again, though, in MR2 is pretty much a CIA operation, and they were based out of Longchen, which was just over the mountain from Samtong and probably 35 miles up the road from Bonson. And CIA was based there. The Ravens, the forward air control, Air Force forward air controllers were based there. A good number of T-28s flown by Hmong were there, and of course there was a large CIA operation. And I got to know a few of the CIA men very well. Lyle Brown was one. Hugh Tovar, who was chief of station, I used to meet with him at the restaurant before taking off in the morning to go up to Bonson. I should go back. When we were at Samtong, we lived there, and I would stay up there for 2 weeks, or 2.5 weeks, come back to Mianchen for a day or two, and then go back up. And I lived in a house right next to the hospital with Blaine Jensen, who was the assistant area coordinator, and Albert Faure, a French mechanic, who was a former French legionnaire that was at Dien Bien Phu. At any rate, so we'd, at Bonson, we went back and forth by air every day. And the ambassador didn't want anyone staying, or didn't want people to stay up there routinely. I did stay in the villages on occasion with either Pop or with just the China medic, and I would go out and stay in a village. But most nights we returned to Vientiane. Because SOG was top secret, I never mentioned or told anyone I was at SOG, and basically, I don't think the agency guys knew that I was ex-SOG and, had been around. Some of these agency guys, or most of the ones at Longchen, were ex-smoke jumpers, had a 6 months training at the farm. And others, there were a couple Marines, maybe one or two ex-Army, but for the most part, people that I wasn't comfortable talking with, and they probably weren't comfortable talking with me, thinking I was a typical usator. For example, George Bacon was stationed at Lima Site 32, where I had a dispensary at the end of the airstrip. So when I went in there, I would see George, and he was usually reading a pocketbook or brushing his teeth. And I thought he was a bit strange and never really talked to him very much. And had I known he had been a SOG medic at CCN, and, of course, I was a SOG medic also, I'm sure we would have become great friends. But again, because of the top secret security clearance surrounding SOG, I never mentioned or talked to anybody about it. But at any rate, there were some good agency guys that I got along very well with. And one was Lyle Brown, who was on the cover of Convoy's book, standing near the bombed out tank on Skyline Ridge. So Hugh Tovar would meet with me in the morning before we'd fly up north, and once a week or once every 2 weeks, and would just talk about what was going on up north. And I really had a lot of respect for Hugh, and again for people like him and like Lyle Brown. But mainly I wanted to talk about the Hmong. And the Hmong, again, were a primitive people, came to this country in 75 and later, and they've done remarkably well. When I lived in Wisconsin, which was a large Hmong population, usually the top 10% of every high school class was Hmong, usually Hmong girls. again, thinking that they only had a written language for the past 70 odd years, it was amazing that they did so well in America. Over 1,200 Hmong have received advanced degrees, and many are doctors and lawyers. Many also have been elected to city, county, state, and federal office. So I've been very impressed with what the Hmong have done in this country. I'm also, I have also been involved with trying to help Hmong veterans become established in this country. And together with Chapter 73 of the Special Forces Association, we trained Hmong, got them uniforms, trained them on how to march. And they marched in all the local parades on Memorial Day and Veterans Day. So they again, we helped them get established through not only the Special Forces Association, but Vietnam Veterans of America and other organizations. In I would say early on, I began speaking with the Hmong veterans about some sort of recognition for their service and trying to gather names of those who had died. There was no official records. And that led then on to the idea of establishing a memorial, which we finally did and dedicated in 2005 in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And on that memorial, it not only lists the names of Hmong killed, but also the Hmong that served in the Secret War, and also all the Special Forces killed in Laos, all the Air America, Air Force, Continental Air Services men that were killed in Laos. So it was quite an accomplishment. I'm very proud of that memorial and the role I played in getting it established and up and going. I did make a DVD on the Hmong, which I sold in order to raise money, which actually raised $35,000 for that memorial. And again, a beautiful sight. And this last May on Memorial Day, I was the guest speaker, honored to be the featured speaker at the memorial, which was attended by 300 or 400 people. And now I guess I'm ready, open for questions.
All righty, that was amazing. And I was taking time to get some photos together of some of the men you were mentioning. We've had an influx of new viewers come in while you were talking, but I figured at the very beginning I wanted to show George Washington Bacon, and then I thought folks would be interested in checking out some of your gear that you have assembled today for us. But here is Mr. George Bacon, who Mr. Steve was talking about earlier. Did you cross paths with Mr. Daniels while you were in Laos?
All the time. Yeah.
So was I see him, Mr. George mentioned a lot, and then Digger Odell. Was Digger Odell around a lot too?
Yes.
In that time?
Good guy.
He's a Force Recon legend before even all of this, and then just continually started building upon his reputation. And now, he's talked about in not just Force Recon, but CIA legendary circles. That's you were rubbing shoulders with some very, very influential guys. And I hate you and George really didn't get to talk about y'all's experiences both being SOG medics. I think y'all would have probably hit it off pretty well. Although some people say he was a strange bird, but still, y'all probably would have hit it off pretty cool. Let's see. Did you want to, since you were kind of talking about the training and everything, would you like to talk about the gear and kind of talk about what all y'all were using at that point in time to train the Lao and all of that?
Well, officially, the State Department didn't want us civilians carrying weapons. So initially, later on, we all carried openly, but initially I didn't carry openly. And so what I had was an M2 M1A1 carbine, which I had the French mechanic for cut the barrel off right here, and then it would fit inside my M5 aid bag, which I carried everywhere. Every time I got on an airplane, I carried my medical bag. So the M1A1 sat across the top inside the bag, and so no one knew I was carrying a weapon. Some of the things that I brought from Vietnam that I still kept all through Laos and used, one of them was a boonie hat, and we had the panel sewn on inside. So if there was air over us, we'd have to turn our hats inside out and let them know that we were friendlies and not the enemy, because we were usually with indigenous troops. Another item that I had in Vietnam that I carried all through Laos was my Puma knife. And I liked the Puma because it was a heavy blade and it was good for digging and chopping. I never expected to stab anybody. It was more of just a working tool.
Wow, I've never even seen one of those before. Wow.
And then another thing that I brought back that I still had was a pen flare that I was in SOG. And so I still have a pen flares. But
that is too cool.
But my daily routine, like I say, was flying in porters or helicopters, jet rangers. And so I always carried that bag. And my interpreter, Chief Medic Leach, I always carried a long gun. Carried my M16. Initially, I think an AK. Then I got an M16. And then later, Rocky Neeson, ex-Special Forces Team Sergeant and Continental Air Pilot, gave me his car 15 when he went back to Vietnam. So in the later, probably 71, 72 around there, I carried that car 15 everywhere when I was up country.
That was a welcome addition to your gear loadout, having that bad boy.
Yep.
Well, could you explain a little bit why? I mean, I kind of know why they didn't want y'all openly carrying, but I mean, it seems awful hamstrung of them to put on y'all that y'all are going to be out in Laos of all places, training and all of that, and they don't want y'all openly carry. Well,
it was typical State Department, and it's probably one of the reasons why the CIA really didn't trust the State Department very much. And I understand why.
In the long run, you can. I'm certainly glad they loosened it up for y'all to where y'all could start carrying, because, gosh, some of the stuff I've read from the Skyline Ridge book and heck, some of Mr. George's battles are talking about him being caught with his pants down and only having his Browning high power and shooting it. NVA coming in to try and overrun Leprosy 20, I think, or 35, or I forgot which one, but
that's probably those Leprosy 32 won't loan.
32. So many of them, I can't get them all mixed up. Scott was warning, so you couldn't even open carry a pistol in the beginning.
I carried, I had a 5-shot 38 Smith & Wesson that I carried under my shirt all the time. Okay. And then the bag was, whenever I got on the airplane, the bag went with me. But I don't think that the guidance ever changed about open carry, just everybody started doing it. And even the ex-IVS guys and USAID guys, they were carrying M16s even at Samtong.
Wow. So,
I guess that we just disregarded the guidance.
I was about to say is if, as long as no State Department guys are on the ground and y'all's photos aren't getting to them, I'd push the limit as far as I could as well. Scott
that was one of the things that, coming from SF and having a top secret, I never let anyone take my photo. in Laos. So there aren't very many photos of me in Laos. And I think the couple that you have, Father Bouchard, took. And Father Bouchard was a great man, is a great man. He's still alive in a seminary in Massachusetts. And he used to travel among the Hmong villages, and especially where you had a few converted Catholics, and say mass at those villages. And that's a photo right there that Father Bouchard took when I walked with him from village to village over a couple of 3 days. On the right is Lee Chai, the chief medic, and on the left is one of Father Bouchard's, I guess, watchers, and one of the ones that led him down through the past, through the jungle from village to village.
Now, is that your boonie cap that you've still got right there?
That's it.
That is just amazing. That is too cool. Wow. And you had mentioned your med bag that you chop down your carbine for. Well, when you were going out or when you were carrying that, how much was that just for a day's trip? What all were you packing in that to go out with for?
Primary medical supplies. And thinking that if we ever went down in the aircraft, the medical supplies would be the most important. That's what I carried. And I was a medic.
Did some good questions came in. I'll get to those in a second. And one of the other newest photos, I'll go ahead and bring up because it's a wonderful photo. I found it when they were talking about the leper villages, but this brings up two facts. Here's one photo that one other photo of Mr. Steve that was taken. I believe you said this was at a wedding.
Yes, the woman would be in the yellow blouse with there. It was her wedding, and her husband standing next to Vang Pao there. And of course, I'm on the other side of Vang Pao. So it was a wedding at Ban Son.
And what I forgot who the young lady is.
Yeah, everybody asked me that, and I have no idea who she was. So she was up there visiting. Someone invited her up. Also, if you look straight above the groom, straight on top up there, that's Nun Chanita, a super guy, super good medic, and again, he was a Camus or similar to Montagnards in Vietnam. He's still alive in California, and I correspond and talk with him. And we could communicate on Facebook quite a bit.
That's amazing. I'm so glad Father B is still alive, and some of your compatriots that you ran with are still alive to where y'all can catch up. There's names listed right here that I just saved the photo from, and I will find her name because it is actually listed, and I'll find out more on that. I was always curious about that. I think it said she was working with some of the female nurses. I'll figure out here in a minute.
She could have been with the International Red Cross also, who came up about that time. They were up around it, and they were surveying the area. And we also began a malaria eradication program, spraying DDT. So I trained a bunch of my medics they trained my medics on how to spray the villages with DDT for mosquitoes.
Oh.
The Hmong, who originally, stayed in the highlands, were really above the area where there were a lot of malaria. But once we moved to Ban Son and lower valleys, malaria was just terrible. It decimated the people, and it was an ongoing thing, either trying to eradicate the mosquitoes or treat the malaria. And it killed a lot of people, especially a lot of young babies before they were 2 years old.
And another thing that is so not interesting, it's sad, but to see that the leprosy, not only in Laos, but talking to the Saw guys at Kontum, there was a leprosium down across over the bridge that they would visit and donate money to and all that. And I was so surprised to see how bad that the leprosy was in Laos, that they still had significant people suffering from it.
Yeah, Father Bouchard took care of the lepers, and he had a difficult time getting the drugs to treat leprosy, and it wasn't on my normal formulary. So I ordered Dapsone, and I forgot the other drug to treat malaria, right from Okinawa, and I would supply Father Bouchard. And on one occasion, I took the doctor from Bien Shem, American doctor, and embassy doctor, and took him up to a leper village where everybody in the village had leprosy. And he amputated toes and fingers because they were already dead. The nerves were gone, and he did some just crude amputations. And of course, the lepers fixed a nice lunch for us. And I remember on the airplane getting back, felt like I was itching, scratching all over. I just that was my first real any prolonged stay with lepers, and they were some very advanced cases also.
And I mean, with the medicine you're getting in there, is there a cure, or is it's uncurable? You can only help to contain it, kind of disease,
or can basically contain it.
Wow, man, I when I hear you guys talking about it, and especially the Sogman, it's very touching. And I believe the Leprosy run in Khartoum was by a nun, a sister that ran it, and just salt of the earth people, wonderful people. Scott was talking about your knife. He said your blade looks similar to the Kukris, the Gurkha blade.
And I think the Gurkha blade has a curve to it. And this knife, let's see if I can get it up there. What's interesting about it is it's a real heavy blade. It's probably 3/16 of an inch thick. And with the heavy tip on it was good for chopping bamboo. And I used it to make splints all the time, and also to dig. And so you could get it like a banana knife through SOG, but I thought it was just too heavy to carry. And this was fine for me.
That looks perfect. And like you said, you can kind of see where it would have that perfect chopping head. And yeah, we were actually looking at the Bolos the other day, and they're just too big and wieldy in the jungle out there.
This thing is razor sharp still.
Oh, I was looking at that blade, and it looks like it'll shave hair off your face. Oh, Mary Jo has an interesting question. Did you ever get to witness any of the Hmongs' shamanistic spiritual ceremonies? I know they believe in Huplig soul calling can heal PTS. I may have said all of that wrong, but did you get to witness any ceremonies?
Yeah, many times. In fact, I would make it a point to meet the village shaman, every village I went into, and would try to convince them that not only is your medicine good, but my medicine is good as well. And let's work together. You do your thing, but also don't discourage the patient from taking my medicine. And so it was one of the things that I tried to do all the time. And so, yes, shamans, and still in this country, there are many shamans here. And I've been to ceremonies with shamans here in the States, especially in Wisconsin.
It seems like, as a matter of fact, the shaman movement, if you will, has now started to somewhat grow with our GWAT veterans coming home and starting more to experiment with the psychedelic, the ayahuasca treatments and such as that. It seems like there's a renewed invigoration to look back into the older civilizations and their treatments and healing methods. So absolutely. And we've heard stories of guys at A camps or in the Mike forces or what have you, saying that, oh, the shaman or the witch doctor or whatever said that he's got bad juju, and the guy would just progressively get worse because he thought it was real, and it self conjured it, if you will, that he was sick and all that. And finally, the team doctor went over there and was like, let's clean this. They did a ceremony, did it, and he came back and was immediately feeling good and like nothing had ever happened. So he quickly realized, much like you, that he needs to get in touch with the local shaman and make sure they're on the same page, so to speak.
One of the other things that the Hmong, again, were quite superstitious, but a lot of them had experience with French medicine, which the French usually gave inoculations for everything. And so many times when I'd get a guy that had a problem and he'd insist that he wanted a shot, he wanted an injection. So I give him the pills that I thought he needed. And I always carried ampules of sterile water in my bag. So I'd always give him a shot of sterile water along with the right medications just to keep him happy. Especially the old guys, they like those shots.
That's why, and I bet they, as soon as they got it, they were like, "Oh, I'm good to go now. I'm back in the game."
There were things, simple things. The Hmong didn't even tell time. They didn't know anything about watches or telling time. They judged things by distance, how far, how long, how many days it would take to walk. They had no wheels. They used ponies. Many in the remote areas, especially in Phong Sali, never bathed. And I remember when we brought refugees down from Phong Sali, we were about to be overrun. That's a separate story about that evacuation. But we brought them down, and we decided we'd give them, inoculate them with usually measles, and then treat them for malaria and dysentery because they all had it. But at any rate, I remember when giving the shots, I'd be rubbing the alcohol sponge on the patient's arm, which looked bronze, dark brown, basically. But after I wiped it, it's whitest skin you'd ever see. And but once the Hmong sort of got down into the area of Southern Bonsall, I mean, then they became like Lao, and they bathed 2 or 3 times a day if they could. But yeah, there were just some things that were really primitive. And I'd worked with Japanese, of course, and Okinawans and Filipinos and Vietnamese and Nung, Chinese Nung, and Taiwanese. And so, I was familiar with Asians, but the Hmong were a whole different thing. And it really was a learning experience. And, I have so many Hmong friends today, and I love them like brothers. And some of them even named their kid Steve. So
wow, that's got to be a high honor for you. I know that's got to feel good for you.
Yeah.
Wow. God.
So
and speaking about the them learning as they got further down and amongst you guys and all that, showering and wanting to shower more. I'm blanking on the man's name. There's a great book called Green Beret War Stories during the Vietnam period, and he was a USAID member, and I can't remember the year. Again, I'm blanking on the name, but they were having issues with cleanliness and trying to get everyone to clean properly and this and that. And they had one kid who had literally never been under running water or bathed, and they got showers set up finally. And the young boy, every time they were looking for him, thought he had gone missing. They'd go straight over the showers, and he was taking a shower. He'd take 3, 4, 5 showers a day, and it got to be where his nickname was shower in Laos, or his native language, Tam, or something to that effect. And I thought that was very funny. Once he got around showers, he loved them. Couldn't get him out of it.
Well, at Bon Son, we had a long graveled airstrip, and it could take C-130s. And So we had our warehouses on one side, and behind the warehouses was the road that came from Vientiane, went all the way to Longshan eventually. But at any rate, across the runway was a Lao Tung and Lao village. And there was a river that ran along there. And you could see them. They had outhouses over the river. They'd be cleaning chickens, bathing, all in the same area, doing all of it together. And as much as we tried to tell them to do, clean your chickens upstream, bathe ahead of that, and then outhouse further downstream. But it was an ongoing deal all the time.
I mean, that had to be, I know it was dangerous, but that had to be one of, or probably, the most interesting time of your life doing all of this stuff, coming in contact with all of the different ethnicities that you just mentioned. I'm glad you wrote a book, to say the least. And again, guys, if you are wanting to hear more on this, please go out. It's listed in the show notes. It is a wonderful, wonderful book. What else? There was something else I wanted to ask you about that I forgot to ask you about. Your kind of secret mission of, I believe it was the road teams and training or getting medics to be to do road interdictions. Was that correct? Were you training the medics to go on road interdiction missions?
No, I only trained the medics in medical procedures, and the CIA would send them out. I often would deliver these M5 bags to the medics in the field. And they were pre-packed bags, and dispensaries, we'd bring in boxes of medicines and so on. But to the SGUs out on site, I would deliver the M5 bags, usually by helicopter, sometimes H-34, but mostly Jet Rangers later on.
Okay.
And so these road watch teams were in the areas that probably spike teams were operating from the other side. And I was wondering if they'd ever come in contact with each other, or maybe even had pitched battles. I never know.
I didn't even think about that, and that would be something to ask. No, we probably never know, but I would be interested to finding out about that. Your off duty, that's what I would mixed up, your off duty or your secondary mission of bright light and recovery. For down pilots, I should say. What did you do? What was that training / op tempo? What was that like?
When any aircraft, whether it was military or civilian, went down, we had circling C-130s all the time, daytime and nighttime. And they would relay a message that the aircraft was down and give the coordinates. And if I was already in the airplane, I would head for that site immediately. And porters could land in 50 feet if there was any flat ground at all. But at least if I could locate the crew, I could circle it and then radio to people in choppers, using agency or Air America choppers with H-34s would go in. So I was on dozens of search and rescues and never made a rescue. Only did recoveries. One of my good friends, Paul Birch, was a Continental pilot, and he augured in on a rice drop. I think his engine quit or went into reverse. And I got to the site almost immediately after he crashed. And every bone in his body was broken. His head was almost torn off. And I brought him back to Vientiane. Later on, the tallest mountain in Laos is Pubia, and a C-46 was just 100 feet too low, or not even that, probably 50 feet too low, and hit the top of that mountain and killed everybody on board. And so a team, actually Al Roman, who was ex-Special Forces, worked for USAID, Larry Martin, who was Requirements Office, military Army guy, and 3 or 4 of my medics we landed a chopper as far up that mountain as we could, and then hiked the rest of the way to the crash site. And it was, again, the tallest mountain in Laos, and it was every plant had thorns on it. It seemed like it was a tough go getting up there. And we got to the crash site, and actually, it was a huge earth slide down the mountainside where the plane hit, and then the plane went further down the mountain. So we went to the actual earth slide place to see if we could recover bodies or parts of bodies or anything. And we ended up, because it was so late, we got there, we tied a rope between some trees on the mountainside so we wouldn't slide off. And we just sort of slept there on the mountainside. And, but we noticed this smell. And there's, once you smell a decaying body, you'll never forget that smell. And we could smell it, but we couldn't find it. And finally, I think it was Al Roman looked up in the tree, and there's a lower leg up in the tree. And that happened to be the lower leg of the captain, Captain Weber. And I recognized it because he had these unique shoes. They were like short boots, there's a zipper and a strap on them. And I remember him wearing those. And so that's Captain Weber's leg. And so I brought that down to Vientiane and turned it over to the embassy, basically, and with a statement saying that I believed it was Captain Weber's remains.
And unfortunately, that was the only remains recovered.
We found small pieces of flesh and bone, and that was it. I believe that before we had gotten there, some Hmong had gotten to the actual aircraft and pulled the bodies out, and a couple of bodies were recovered. And I'm not 100% sure about that, but I think that's the way it worked.
Now, you mentioned always having a 130 in the air. Now, SOG has, a bright light teams on standby, if you will, and all this. What was y'all's modus operandi in aircraft going down? Did y'all have a team ready or supposed to be ready, or was it an ad hoc call for whoever was ready? Let's go.
Yeah, everybody went. It was amazing how everybody would stop what they're doing, just head to the coordinates. And often at the same time, especially if it was on the PDJ or that area north of PDJ, then we'd also have MiG alerts. And so the C-130 would report MiGs in the area, and then everybody would go to ground. And then as soon as we're clear, then go back up and search. And say, I recovered bodies many times, but very seldom live ones. One interesting case, though, is an A1E went down on the PDJ, and it was a two-seater. And so I had gotten there in the Porter and was about to land when Air America Huey swooped in and picked the guys up. And so I followed them back to Sam Tong Hospital. And the pilot, co-pilot, I'm not sure which was which, but one of them had a fractured femur. He was hurt pretty bad. The other guy was unhurt, basically. So at that time, I had a full beard. I was carrying an AK-50, folding stock AK. And so I helped him off the airplane, brought the one with the fractured femur, put him on a litter, and brought him up to the hospital, which was right there. The chopper landed right in front of the hospital. But anyway, the hospital was full of Hmong war wounded. So Doc Borden, our American surgeon, was there, and he said, "We'll take care of him right here on the porch." So the porch had a railing on it, and Doc Borden had me pull traction on this guy's femur. Well, I wrapped my legs around the railing of the porch. So I pulled traction on the femur. Well, Doc Borden put a plaster cast on it. So I had to hold it while that cast set. And I was sweating bullets. Meantime, the other guy, I had put him on a bench right there at the hospital porch. And so Doc says, "Okay, you can let go of the traction now." So, okay, so I grabbed this guy, I said, "Come on with me." And we go over to Pompilio's house because I know he had a refrigerator full of cold beer. And Pop wasn't there, so I opened his refrigerator, pull out 2 beers, hand him one, and it was a Pabst Blue Ribbon. And the guy looks and he says, "My God, you're Americans." He thought he'd been captured because here all these weird-looking guys, no markings. No one told him anything about hospital and Samsung. We have all these little nurses running around in white uniforms, 15-year-olds. And this guy had no idea what was going on until he saw that Pabst Blue Ribbon. Then he takes off his vest, gave me his vest, which had a survival radio in it, and a nice 38, gave it to me. He said, "I won't need this anymore." And it's funny, last year I got in contact with that guy through a Continental pilot, Lee Gossett, put me in contact with him.
Holy cow. I can't. The fact that there y'all are setting and fixing and plaster casting a broken femur on the porch, and then this whole time you and your beard, he's thinking y'all are foreigners until he sees PBR given to him from the cold fridge. I mean that's one for the books right there. I can't even. And so cool of him to give you his jacket and his survival. That is just too cool of a story.
I do have that survival vest in the closet also.
Oh man, that is just. Did you ever find out? Was he an Air America guy, or was he an aircraft
No,
that had just?
He was Air Force. It was
He was Air Force.
A1E that went down.
Okay, yes, okay, the 2-seater A1E. Wow, I wonder what the heck they were.
They were bombing on the PDJ when they were shot down.
Okay, I need to bring up. I've got 2 maps. One actually points out the PDJ because I know people are going to be asking, what in the heck are they talking about the PDJ and all this and all that? Let me see if these 2 at least show a little of the area where we're talking. I've got a better one.
Yeah, right in the center where all the arrows are pointing. That's basically the PDJ. And there were 2 high plateaus in Laos. This one, Plain de Jars, also the Bolovans Plateau down south, which was high elevation, relatively flat area where they grew rice and corn, paddy rice, in fact, on the PDJ. And also, the plain is named Plain of Jars because of these huge stone jars that were located all over the plain, hundreds of them. And, these things were as big as a Volkswagen Bug, hollowed out, and no one really knows for sure what they were used for, but they were scattered all over the plain.
I'm going to pull up. I'm glad you mentioned that because I always, when I bring that up, to mention the jars. But of interesting note, there's Udorn where some of the bombers come out of.
Right. F-Force out of Udorn, and Jolly Greens also for rescue.
The Mugia Pass, a hot area.
Later in the war, when we were evacuating people out of Mung Sui, I was up there all day evacuating the refugees, and we brought in 2.5 trucks. And now these people had seen airplanes before, but they'd never seen a truck. And when these trucks drove up, they just head for the hills. They were scared to death of those 2.5s. Finally, we get them back, get them on the 2.5s, and drove them to Ban Son. But we had Jolly Greens there also that were evacuating troops from outposts and bringing them to Munkasi. And they were then being sent on to Longchen. So I'd been working there all day. I was dirty, nasty, and come to time before it gets dark to head back to Ban Son and talk to the pilots. And they said, we had a porter pilot there and a chopper pilot also, along with the Jolly Green Giant Air Force pilots. And so they said Ban Son was socked in, Longchen was socked in. And so I said, okay, well, I'll just get on a Jolly Green and go back to Udorn, because I trust those guys. They can fly through anything. So here it was, it's 100 degrees down the ground, but they go up to about 15,000 feet, and I'm freezing cold in that aircraft. And land at Udorn. And so I go over to the CIA offices, and they gave me a bunk. I took a shower, put my dirty clothes back on, and went downtown for a couple of beers and stuff. But at any rate, I think, back to the story about the evacuation of Fong Sali. And that was where I told you about using the alcohol swab on the patient's arm. But at any rate, Fong Sali was way up in northern Laos, up in this area in your map. I don't know if you show up. This would be way up there. But at any rate, so we're evacuating by air in porters. And so all day long, I'd load up a porter with people, and they'd want to bring their pigs and chickens and everything. Here, Fong Sali, way up there. So I was evacuating out of there. And so we really overload the porters, but the airstrip was a downhill airstrip, and it dropped off on a cliff. So we'd go down the airstrip, overloaded basically. And as it went off the end of the airstrip, it would drop. At this time, the Hmong and the pigs would all puke and crap at the same time. So I'm doing this all day long on the same airplane, back and forth. And pretty soon, you know what Tiger Balm is? I had Tiger Balm stuffed up my nose and all over my mustache because the stink was terrible. We had no way to really wash it out until we're done for the day. So I made several trips from Fong Sali down to Ban Song that day and evacuating those folks.
Gosh. And I've got another map here. Let me make sure I've got it. That's this is the daily debrief with some of let's see, refugees moving, Bana. This is the ridge line during the current situation in Laos. Actually, that is not the one I was looking for. I apologize about that. There is the plain of jars, though.
Yeah.
Vang Pao looking over an all-out attack. That was another question that I've been curious about, and as well as other people. At this point in time, is this strictly an NVA fight that's going on against the Laotians and the Thai, or are you seeing any NVAs helping the foreigners, Russian, Chinese, anything of that sort going on yet? Or
primarily North Vietnamese army with some Patha Lao, and the Xing Quang was primarily North Vietnamese army. So you have these young Hmong kids, with minimal training up against hardcore NVA divisions. And they did a fantastic job, but I mean, they also took horrific casualties. So it was all NVA mostly. And down near Van Vieng and areas like that, there was some Patha Lao, but mostly in MR2 was hardcore NVA.
There's another little map, and it's amazing to see how young your guys were, and reading about the fierce fights they put up against just onslaught and human wave attacks there when it started really hitting the fan later on. I mean, just brave. I can't imagine 15-year-olds today, having to fight a communist army head charging straight into them like that. It's unbelievable. And I recommend, besides Mr. Steve's book, there's a book called The Battle for Skyline Ridge.
By Mule Parker.
I'm forgetting the name of the author, but if you literally just type that in, it is a amazing book showing the men that Mr. Steve was training, and then Mr. Daniels, Mr. George Washington Bacon being there. It's great reading. Questions we'll get to real quick. Scott was curious about your med bag. He says he was saying it looks like that's got some pretty good weight to it.
It wasn't that heavy. I mean, again, it was just medical supplies, regular dressings, some medications, splints, things like that I always carried when I got on the airplane.
When you did carry your carbine, did you have mags inside there that you took with you?
Yeah, I always had mags.
That's
Yeah,
I was hoping that went along with the medicine just in case.
yeah. And
um,
not many because it wasn't like I expected, prolonged firefights or anything. I usually had one or two spare mags. Um, Another story was a little bit interesting, but later on in the years, maybe in the 70s, when we had the road from Vientiane to Bonson open, we'd get convoys bringing most of the supplies up there by truck. And there was a lot of bus traffic and along that road also, people moving back and forth, going down to Vientiane to buy goods to sell up in the markets in Xinjiang province. And so one day, the path of Lao, uh, again, south, and that area would be near the Nampong Dam, uh, ambushed a bus, pulled everybody off, and shot and killed women, children, everybody, and just left them in the road. I have photos of that, which I don't want to share, but I do have photos of that. So after that, what I would do when I was at Bonson in the afternoon, if there was a convoy coming up, Leachai, the chief medic, and I would load up magazines and M79 rounds, and we'd fly in front of the trucks. They come by convoy then after this ambush, and we'd fly ahead of them in a Jet Ranger low, and I'd be shooting the M79 out of one window, and Leachai would be firing M16 out the other window, and loud, and all we had was cotton to stuff in our ears. And on one of these trips, when we were doing that, hot round fell down the pilot's shirt collar, shell casing, and he did a lot of hijinks with that helicopter. I thought we were going to go in, but finally he straightened out. But I did that several times, and we just fly ahead of the convoy, shooting up either side of the road.
And so mostly the contact you had were with Continental Air and a few times with Air America, but mostly Continental.
Yeah, in fact, Air America did a movie that's out there. I'm sure you can find it on the internet. But it's a part about 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of me in there. They actually gave me an Air America shirt to wear, and I was delivering medicine to a site. It was all staged, but they filmed me, talking to the medics and looking at the dispensary, that sort of thing, unloading the supplies.
That's wild you just said that because someone had just posted in one of the groups on Facebook the Air America documentary, and I was like, I didn't even know about it, and clicked on it and was looking at some of it, and I thought I recognized you, and I was going to ask you if you had any play in that, and there my answer was my question was just answered.
Flying men and flying machines, something like that.
Yes, sir. It's Air America flying
machines, something like that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I believe it's on YouTube, guys. You can literally type in Air America, either movie or documentary, and I'm pretty sure it'll pop up. It's free of charge, of course, with ads in it, but you can watch it nonetheless for free. I recommend watching it, although it is, as we just learned, a bit staged. It still gives you a nice insight of what's going on at this point in time. Andrew, go ahead. Andrew was curious. This is a good one. How challenging was it to differentiate all of these different Asiatic languages that you were coming in contact with?
Well, it was very difficult because right in my area alone, I had Hmong, Lao Tun, which was a separate language, and Lao. And that's why I used my interpreter, Leachai, who could converse pretty well in Lao and Hmong. And so he was invaluable. And he was my right-hand man. I didn't go anywhere without him. And one of the things they taught us in Special Forces, again, I had no chance to go to language training. I was working all the time. excuse me. And so one of the things they taught us in Special Forces, whenever possible, use an interpreter. And that way, if you screw up, you can blame it on the interpreter. And so if you offend somebody, you just blame it on the interpreter. And one of the funny things, a story again about the monks. I'm with an American doctor, I can't think of this right now. Anyway, he was up there working up in Bonson for a while. In fact, he was my boss for a short time. But anyway, we go out to village and we're treating this old gentleman, old monk, and Dr. Mum looks at him, diagnoses him, he talks to him a little bit and decides he's got beriberi. And so he describes it, try to eat plenty of this vegetable soup and we'll give you these pills. And so Lechi is translating all this stuff. And so this old gentleman responds back to Lechi, and Lechi's not telling us what he said. And finally, I said, "Come on, Lechi, what did he say?" He said, "Well, he sure doesn't think this vegetable soup is going to help him anyway, and you guys don't know what you're talking about." So Al Mom's a Southerner, right? He just goes off. He says, well, I can't say the words he used. He said, I'm a effing doctor with 14 years of medical school, and this old fart's telling me I don't know what the F I'm talking about. And shortly after that, Al Mom got a position down at B&Chat.
I mean, it's so interesting reading about this because I mean, you guys are coming into, I mean, SOG's one thing, and don't get me wrong, that's heavy duty, hardcore stuff. But I mean, y'all are coming into effectively the Wild West and having to pick up stuff your own, get your own connections to get supplies, and it's just an amazing story. And I mean, the Hmongs, as Scott just said, he was Googling here on the Hmong and said very, very interesting stuff. I mean, they are. It's their fighting spirit, just them being so funny, coming in contact with, as you said, seeing the trucks for the first time. I mean, that's wild stuff. I can't imagine. It's almost like stepping back in time, I guess.
It was, there are a couple of things I wanted to mention. One of them was especially about Don Dugan. He was an ex-Special Forces medic and went into Special Forces in the 50s. I mean, so he was an old-time SF guy. A lot of experience, Vietnam and 10th Group in Germany. And he was probably late 30s, maybe 40 when I came to Laos. And I just thought of him as an old guy. But he was my mentor, and we remained friends and even worked in another job after Laos together. And I stayed, of course, in contact with him and was with him a couple of weeks before he died. But he was quite a guy, and again, I owe him a lot. He really helped me out.
I mean, that I'm gonna get. We got some good questions coming in. But when you first got there, I know you spoke high of Mr. Buell and a few others. But who do you think helped you hit the ground running as quick as you did? Who helped you out the most? Do you think?
Don Dugan.
Don Dugan.
Guy, yeah. Stan Money showed me around the first time, and now I've been in country maybe a week. And he brings me up to Longchen. Now, Longchen, I don't know if you can see that picture right above my head. That's Longchen, taken several frames, matted together. That's Longchen. And so anyway, Stan takes me up, introduces me to some of the agency guys, and then we sit down in this little open-air restaurant right alongside the airstrip and have some noodles and a beer, right? And I'm just amazed looking at these characters walking by. And maybe probably not a lot of people remember Terry and the Pirates, the comic strip. And And as I looked at this, that's all I could think of. I mean, some Americans with odd bits of uniform and stuff on, and Hmong in traditional dress mixed with a field jacket, and carrying weapons, and this is just amazing. Nobody would ever believe this. And here, you had probably more aircraft taking off and landing than O'Hare at the time.
And I've got a great photo of Longton that I wanted to bring up and show. One's the village, I think, but also one's the runway. And well, here's the little village area, I believe. But
Yeah.
I mean, just nestled in between these mountains. I mean, that's a neat little jut up right there to hide stuff behind. I mean,
that photo, no, it's not reversed. It's good. But I don't know if you can see right up in here. This is CIA headquarters up here. Right there in this area. This is CIA. The restaurant I was talking about was right here. And this is Von Pauw's house and compound here.
I'm trying to see. Holy cow. Okay, so I wish I could get you the controls where you could point everything out, because I just ruined all of that. So up here in the center is the CIA?
Yeah, CIA base up there. They had a restaurant, a bar, quarters, office, and again, down to the lower left corner is Von Pauw's compound.
Okay, so all down here, that's VP's area. Wow. Yeah. Okay. And that's literally, I think I've got the landing strip, but that's the landing strip here, and then the helipad.
End of the landing strip, and off to the right is another car. So it's basically a turnaround area, a fueling area, and an arming area. So everything happened down at that end. So Air Ops building, I think, is right up there and to the center left.
Let's see if I can find this next one. I think actually has coming into the L's. Well, no, there's the opposite side. We're looking. We were looking from this direction down. Now we're looking rear side.
And the first, if you go to the left of that picture, see that hill right there where your hand is? Down, right up above and to the left. There, that hill. That was my first search and rescue, actually recovery. So I want to say a 46, LAOS C-46 took off from the runway, and the pilot took off and did not take the chocks off the elevators. So as he came out of Longchin, he couldn't gain altitude and hit that hill right there and burned. And so I was right there on the scene and got in and started pulling the burned bodies out of that crash.
Oh my God. And your first one is, I mean, right here,
First month I was in Laos, basically.
Gosh. That always, when I saw some of the LS sites, and especially this one, I thought some of these pilots have to have balls of steel to come in on some of these landing zones.
Can you go back to that, Bud? I got that wrong. It's the opposite end where that hill was.
Let me find it up.
The cars were basically the turnaround area, and we were looking down the runway.
Of course, I'm going to click every one but my long 10 photo. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. Yep, I got it right here. There we go.
Yeah, so it would be down at this end. There was a hill right about way up here to your right, way over at the end of the end of the runway. Okay, follow the runway down, and then there's a hill right over to the right.
Okay, over here.
And that's right in there is where that 47 crashed.
God, that is a nightmare. And as I said, I mean, look at what you've got. Those crosswinds coming out of the mountains, and unless you had your stuff together, that's a that's a tough landing. And you had mentioned, guys, I don't know if y'all are familiar. I'll show it just to make sure. I believe this is one of the stall planes that y'all would use. Lee Gossett
Yeah,
with Monk Tribesman over here, and then
yeah,
a C-130.
yeah. That C-130 is Longchenn, and that picture of Lee, I think he landed on the Pt.2, and I may have been with him and even taken that picture because Lee flew for me a lot. We had one aircraft pretty much that was public health designated aircraft, and that was Papa Foxtrot Whiskey. And then there were a couple others we get when whiskey wasn't available. But Lee, in the first couple of years, Lee flew it for me an awful lot, and we got to be good friends. And
That's that is a wonderful, wonderful photo of him out there. And let's see, is that yep, he is on the plane of jars right there.
yeah,
Before we close out, I'll bring up the jars to where people can see them, because that is a beautiful sight, seeing all those wild jars just out there in the middle of nowhere like that. Well, we kind of just answered it, but Jason just jumped in. He was saying, did you know any of the pilots very well? I'm wondering they were chosen from any of the units that supported SOG or maybe the Seawolves. Where did the pilots come? Were they sheep dipped Air Force or?
no, the Porter pilots were mostly ex-military pilots. In fact, some of the great ones were World War II fighter pilots. There's a whole number of them. Another funny story. Al Adolf was one. He had a great big huge mustache. Of course, I told you about Rocky Neeson, Lee Gossett.
Was Heine Adderholt around?
I met Heine later, not in Laos, but of course, he was in and around. Of course, I met and knew Bill there. Mm-hmm. In fact, later, Bill and Heine both stayed at my house for the weekend in Wisconsin, and they told some great stories when they spent the night there. And but I forgot what I was going to tell you. Oh, some pilots. So Al Rich was another one, a World War II fighter pilot. So we were at a site way up north and close to the Vietnamese border, and the Hmong there were telling us that they thought the Vietnamese were moving weapons down a river that was right near the village. So, okay, we decided we'll go do something about that. So I had an AK at the time, and the porters had drop doors. So Al opens the drop doors. He positioned me in the drop doors, spread eagle, my legs braced, the AK between my knees. And he says, I'm going to dive on that boat if we see one. And you just let loose with a magazine. So, okay. So we go up. Sure enough, there's a boat down the river. Al puts this thing in a dive. And now everything in the airplane's swirling around and going out between my legs down the door. And I thought I was going to go out through the door. And I'm yelling for Al, pull up, pull up, pull up. I never got a shot off. And I said, that was it for that day.
Ooh, man, those I can imagine those WW2 guys were wild and had some brave pilots. Heine Adderholt's got a great Air Commando book of his time in Vietnam and even before, and it's a great read. I've got a photo of him I'll pull up in a bit of you and Mr. Bill Lair with him. But God, what a ride that one was.
Yeah, Bill and Heine were just great gentlemen, great guys, and I really enjoyed them. And when they stayed at my house for the weekend, I helped organize a reunion of Hmong veterans in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, and they came to speak at that thing, and so they stayed at my house. And in the morning, and before we went to this meeting, they were telling stories. And one of my stories, Bill Lara is a very unassuming guy, very humble guy. But he was saying, it was amazing. All I had to do was raise my arms and the sky would turn black with airplanes. And I just thought that was one of the funniest things coming from him. But both great guys and good friends. Both
Absolute legends.
deceased. Rest in peace.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, just two cold warriors of the highest standard. Mm, mm, mm. Jason, again, he was late joining us, but were there any customs with the Hmong, the Lao, or any other groups you came in contact that took you a long time to kind of get used to?
Well, yeah, it did. I mean, you never got used to it, but they had some customs. For example, right near the end, I want to say it was probably April of 75, I got called a bullet letter. And the letter was addressed to me, and in it was a bullet. And it says, "We're going to kill you, Yasuko, and Tommy, my wife and son."
Oh.
Unsigned, of course. So I had to report it to Vientiane, and the ambassador then, or Mr. Mann, the chief of aid, said, I couldn't go up north anymore. So I had to stay down in Vientiane when everything was falling apart. And it was one of the saddest things because some Hmong wrote that letter to me, and somebody I'd pissed off or, disrespected some way. But at any rate, so I wasn't there to help get those people out of Bon Son and get them across the river to Thailand. But luckily, I was in Vientiane, so when they did get it to Vientiane, I could get them money and get them across the river into Thailand without problem. So I did a lot of that in the last couple of weeks, right? Just moving people across the river to Thailand and getting them paid.
So now, did the Thais have a lot of? Did y'all have a good rapport with the Thai and their forces to where you could connect them and get the refugees and the people needing to flee out safely, or was there some
No, this was before any refugee camps were set up or anything, and most of the time these people would just try to find Hmong in northern Thailand to go stay there, or they'd go to Bangkok where they could just disappear. But it was a sad time. In fact, I've talked about Father Bouchard, who was a great friend. And I used to, when I first got there, again, being young and dumb, I didn't think I should be sending my U-8 aircraft to pick him up and move him to place. But after I got to know him a little bit, I thought, this guy is unbelievable and really a man of God. And so not only would I send an airplane to get him, I'd divert airplanes to get him, but I'd always send a couple of cold beers on the airplane. As being a Catholic missionary, he could have a beer or two, unlike my Protestant friends. And so I'd always send a couple of cold beers when there was a pickup for Father B. And even when he was in Indonesia, when he'd come home on home leave from Indonesia, he'd always come to our house and visit and stay with us. And I think I may have told you in the last video, but the Hmong are already planning Father B's funeral, even though he's healthy and not near death yet. But they're planning his funeral, and they've asked me to do the eulogy for Father B, which I've already written and sent forward.
Wow, that is unbelievable, and I'm so glad he's still around, and that shows the respect and the admiration that they're already wanting to make sure they've got everything set to where they send him off with the highest honors they can. That's absolutely amazing. How old is Father B at now?
He's in his mid-90s.
Man.
And I got another story, and so this is all in the book, but I don't want to give away too much. But one night, again, late in the time we were there, I landed in Vientiane, and Father B was there at the airport waiting for me. He'd come in on another aircraft. And he said, look, my driver was here, and he usually takes me to the Catholic church in town where the priests stay when they're in town. And he said that Pt.2 were planning on killing me this night. So he asked if he could come home with me. So I said, sure. So I brought him home with me, and we lived in KM6, was the American compound outside of Vincennes. It was a very safe area. And so Father B and I, and my wife Yasuko was there at the time, so she cooked a great dinner, and we fed Father B, and then Father B and I sat on our back patio, screened-in patio, and drank, Irish coffee most of the night. And in fact, we didn't sleep. And first light, I drove him to the river and made sure he got on a boat and got across to Thailand. But I had my Browning strapped on all night, even at home, just in case.
Yeah. So he didn't have any issues getting across and getting to safety after.
No, there was no border control or immigration or anything. You just get on the boat and go. And but we didn't know if the communists were going to be at the riverside or anything. So I made sure he got on the boat, and then he got across. But again, Father B's a great friend, and a man of God. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely. And if you want to learn more, again, guys, this book is just absolutely outstanding. And some of the work that is mentioned in here that Father B does, you'll see why the Hmong and Mr. Steve hold him in such high regard. He's just a stellar man.
Another character, of course, was Pop Buell.
Yes.
He was not a healthy guy. He was sort of bandy rooster, short skin with a pot belly, bow-legged, short, pot belly, and he had heart condition. And that's Pop right there. And Jiggs Weldon to the right. And that Ambassador Godley far right. Oh, and Dr. Camoon right above Jiggs as Dr. Camoon, one of the LAOS doctors, one of the very good doctors that worked in Samtong and Banso. Any rate, what was the story? Pop. Oh, so Pop had a heart condition, so I used to carry nitroglycerin, and when he'd go out in the village, I'd go with him most of the time. I was his medic, and so I'd make sure he didn't drink too much, which sometimes was difficult. And so we'd often go out in the village and stay together, and we used to go to near her LAOS house a lot. And he had a model farm, pig breeding program. We also trained medics at his place too, and it was on the way to Longchen. He's near her was a great guy, and again, I'll tell you more about near her. I don't want to get off this story, but near her was a Nikon, and so we'd stay there. But near her made the best corn whiskey, and this stuff was white lightning, pure as could be. You could put a match to it, and it would burn like crazy. And we drank that at near her's house. And so at any rate, later on when Pop was no longer up north and he opened a blind school in Vincennes, and I searched the mountainsides for blind kids and bring them down to Vincennes so they could get a proper education, learn Braille and all that stuff. But so that was Pop's last big project in Laos. So, and Pop used to like to drink and go to mostly the Purple Porpoise at night, which was a bar owned by an Englishman. And so one Saturday morning, now this was after Tom was born. He was less than a year old, probably. And I'm in the house in downtown Vincennes, and there's banging on the door about 5:36 in the morning. It's Pop. Pop wakes us up. I was afraid he was going to wake my son up, but anyway, he said, "Have Yasuko fix me breakfast." And I had a long beard at the time, and he said, "Steve, you look like Grumpy in the Seven Dwarfs." So that stayed with me. Grumpy.
I love. Well, I mean, it's kind of hard not to when I wasn't expecting you to bump in on me and need a sobering up meal for you, but nonetheless, I'll help out.
Look, Yasko jumped right in the kitchen, cooked them bacon and eggs.
Oh, yummy, yummy, yummy. I bet he enjoyed that breakfast.
Yeah,
Um, did you happen to do dental work as well as being a head medic on the villagers and folks you worked with, or did
I,
y'all have a dentist?
I extracted a few teeth in Laos, but mostly I did that when I was in special forces in Okinawa when we did these outreaches to villages. And one day I extracted 40 teeth. Yeah, not all from the same guy.
I was about to say, I hope it's at least two or three out of that
Yeah,
mouths.
yeah, usually one or two in each of these old guys that have been sucking on sugar cane all their lives.
Oh,
But
I
I
can
did I
only.
did extract a couple of teeth in Laos, and actually extracted a couple of my wife's teeth because she wouldn't go to the dentist. So I pulled a couple of her molars.
Yikes! That's tough stuff, man. I've had the wisdom teeth and all that. I've had to pull a few, but when you're out in the middle of nowhere, although you're a trained medic, and I'm sure you had some numbing and all
Oh
that,
yeah,
but that's
of
still pretty
course.
heavy
Of
duty of
course,
your
I
wife.
use lidocaine and lidocaine injection before I pulled the teeth, so they didn't feel anything.
Still a tough lady though. I got to give her that. Taking getting it, it's not wanting to go to the dentist, mind you. I'll let my husband do that. Thank you.
Yeah, this was on Okinawa before we left.
Oh wow! So she had the utmost fate, considering y'all were on Okinawa and could have gone to
Yeah.
the tip top dentist. Hey, there you go. She had faith in you right there.
So
Um,
when I'd left her in Okinawa, went back to the States, it took that summer to get my clearance. Then I came back on the way to Laos. I stopped in Okinawa, asked her if she still would marry me, and she said yes. Now that you have a good job, and so then I went to Laos, and it took 6 months to get the paperwork for her clearance. So then I went back to Okinawa after 6 months. And talked to her family, and they agreed it was okay for us to get married. And her parents were dead, but her elder sister gave us, the okay. But USAID had a ream of paper that had to be filled out, and I filled out most of it. But one of the papers was a document saying that she had no criminal record. So we went to her village city hall, right where she lived, and they said, no, there's no record here. I said, well, you sign this. And no, you have to go to Capital in Naha. So we get in a taxi, go to Naha, and talk to the village, talk to the, I guess, county or whatever official there. They said, you check her record. She has no criminal record. Will you sign the paper? So, oh, no, you have to go back to the village where she lived. So we go back there, and I had to threaten the guy there, and she started crying. And finally, he signed the papers, and we went off to Vientiane where we got married. And we got married at the ACA, the American Community Association. And Blaine Jensen, my boss up in Samtown, who I lived in the same house with when I was there, paid for everything. Had a huge 3-tiered cake. He had brought down all the officers, medics, the governors of Xinguang and Sam Nua, Colonel Dongta, who was a good friend of mine, and he brought everybody down for the wedding. And so we had hundreds of people at the wedding reception.
that's too cool. That's amazing. What a blowout that must. How old were you when you got married?
Let's see. By then, I was 25.
Wow. Not well, by all the time you've been through, I could say, yeah, it's somewhat of an old man by then at 25. 25 pushing 40.
Yeah.
Um Jason was curious, speaking about all your rides and such. Did you ever get to jump on the stick and fly any of the helicopters or any of the planes while you were over there?
Yeah. The pilots encouraged us to learn to fly. And so I'd always sit next to the pilot when we were flying either helicopter or porter. I'd always sit up front. And so they'd never let me land or take off because I guess whatever reason. But for example, we'd leave Vientiane and fly compass heading. And usually it was bad weather. 6 months of the year was rainy, nasty as you go up. So I'd fly the whole compass heading all the way to Bonzone, and then the pilot would land it. And then another time, flying a Jet Ranger. Now I'm flying on the left side, and the pilot's on the right side. So there's one collective. I had pedals on my side and a stick, but the collective was on the wrong side, and I couldn't really get to it. And so I was flying. In fact, this one time, Yasko and Tom had brought him up to Bonzone for a Basi, a ceremony. And so I was flying the Jet Ranger. They were sitting in the back, and I was flying about 150 knots, about 50 feet above the rice paddies on the way back to Vientiane. And of course, then hand it back to the pilot to land it. But there were fun times, crazy times too.
I was about to say that sounds like a good, wild, crazy treetop flyer. Well, heck, you were actually lower than treetop. You were right above the paddies, getting low and flying. That's a lot of fun. I can only imagine. I'd love to learn how to fly either a helicopter or an aircraft, to be quite frank with you. Jason, it seems like most SOG guys say what kept them running missions was the men around them. What was your inspiration throughout this time in your life after SOG to keep putting yourself in harm's way?
Well, it wasn't the same as it wasn't in SOG. I mean, we expected enemy activity. We expected the airplanes to get shot at. We had rough landings, and in fact crashed once with Rocky Neeson flying. But it wasn't quite the same. But I think one of the huge differences that I've thought about a lot in the last few years is when I was in SOG, I had a team around me. I had a team sergeant. I had senior men on the team that, I looked up to, and they were the rock. When I got to Laos, I was on my own. Here I was 24 years old and thought I was hot shit, but I had nobody to rely on. I had to figure it out myself. And so that was one of the real learning experiences. And again, having to supervise 100 medics and train them. It was, I don't know how I did it.
That's, I mean, I when you mentioned being the only American in military region 2 and all that, I was like, yeah, I don't see how you weren't completely burned out and just running on fumes at that point in time. Just
I was only a USAID medic. In fact, CIA had a medic at Longchen, Bob Dingledine, and when I got to Laos, they rotated Bob Dingledine out. So then I was the only medic working as a medic. Of course, George Bacon was there, but nobody knew he was a SOG medic, or I didn't know that.
Did you say, what was the name of the medic you just mentioned?
Bob Dingledine.
Okay, I've got the wrong name. It said Dinwiddie, and I thought I had the right person in a plane to jars declassified thing I was looking through. I have a photo, and considering you're in the land of 1,000 elephants, how often did y'all see elephants? Did y'all did the Mao and the Hmong use elephants, or were the NVA using elephants for beast of burden, or?
NVA used elephants on the trail, and many of the spike teams reported that. And on one search and rescue, it was again rainy season. That's when we lost most airplanes. I was flying for hours, and it was overcast, raining, and we were flying around Phubia Mountain, which again was the highest mountain in Laos. And you get strained, and you're looking, and you're flying circular patterns, search patterns. And I'm looking, and all of a sudden I see a bunch of pigs running through the bamboo up on the top of Phubia. And I looked and looked closer. They weren't pigs, they were elephants just breaking the trees down, running through the trees. A huge herd of elephants. And we used to see elephants in Vientiane all the time, pulling logs or doing whatever. So the Lao used them. And of
Did
course,
you ever see any either in SOG or when you were on rescue missions? Did you ever see any out in the wild that weren't controlled, so to speak, or with anybody?
this was the only time I saw them running. They were wild, running through the trees on the
I bet
mountaintop.
that was a sight, just seeing them just busting trees down off that
Yeah.
mountaintop. um, I wanted to show you, find out who this was. I remember you posted it, and I wasn't sure who this was that you were working with.
Father B.
That's Father B. Okay, gosh, I wish I would have known it was B earlier on. That is the man himself.
Yeah, I
Where
took that photo on that same trip when we were walking between villages, and then he took the photo of me and Leechai
Okay, now it ties together then.
with my
Okay.
pen double E that I brought back from SOG.
So was this I mean, he'd literally just get his hiking gear and then would
Yeah,
get
Keds.
you to
He wore Keds, and it was a Sears Roebuck backpack that he used.
that
Yeah,
is unbelievable. I'm loving him more and more. The more I hear about him out there humping with kids and his walking stick.
yeah.
What a guy. I'm definitely gonna have to fix the name on that and let it be known I finally got a Father B photo. That is outstanding.
In that
Um,
in that rucksack, he had a mask kit, of an Air Force mask kit that was sort of portable and small. And he'd lay this whole thing out in these little huts when he'd say mass. And he'd put on his white robe that he carried in there and say mass. I remember one night, again, another funny story about the Hmong. One night he was saying mass in one of these little huts in the village, and there were only 5 or 6 people in there, maybe. So Lee Chang and I didn't want to crowd in. So we're laying out on the grass on this hillside next to the hut. And it was a beautiful starry night. And I started talking to you. Say, the moon up there, it revolves around the earth. And the earth and the moon revolve around the sun. He wasn't having any of it. He didn't believe any of that. I told him the earth was a round globe like the moon, only bigger. No, flat.
that's like y'all telling us of the moon landing, and they're like, no, 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 the Americans can't take King Bees to the moon. That's not how it works.
Yeah. So that was, I mean, they had no knowledge of primitive cultures, knew math and astronomy. The Hmong had none of that.
And I mean, for them to not have a spoken or written language until, a few years before, or 10, 15 years before, I mean, that's amazing. I mean, literally going back in time.
1952, I believe, when the RPA was established by Father Boutres, another Catholic missionary.
1952. That is just mind blowing. Wow. Kyle is curious about if y'all ever noticed someone was losing their edge or confidence, how would y'all handle that? Would y'all get them off the team or pull them back out of duty, or what would go on with that if y'all notice guys getting rattled?
Well, again, I wasn't on a spike team, and we had a hatchet force. So our team, when we went on an operation, sometimes it'd be half of us, sometimes 3 or 4 of us. And for example, when I went on the operation where I was wounded, more than half the team was with me, and the other half was at the evacuation of Camduck, where the Air Force pilot got the Medal of Honor, and our team was on the last to come out of Camduck. So we were in Laos, they were at Camduck, and so the team that was with me, part of the team, I had the team leader, team sergeant, senior medic, and me. And then we had our demo guy and weapons guy. So, and then the other guy's the lieutenant, and the other guys were at Camduck for that evacuation all at the same time.
How would you
Well,
in
anyway,
Laos?
so there was no way for me as a sergeant to do anything about guys that were incompetent, but I really believed our team leader, the captain, was incompetent. And there's nothing you can do about that. And I surprise people when I tell them that back in those days, SF officers were assigned. They didn't necessarily go through training. And so we had some questionable guys as officers. But our senior NCOs always took charge and knew what the hell was going on.
Oh yeah.
I had great senior guys on our team. Even the junior guys were great. And I think the only ones left alive now are Max Recod, who I room with, and Don Valentine. They're maybe the lieutenant, but those are the two that I know that are still alive.
Wow. And did that? I mean, with you going into a whole different neck of the woods, how would y'all, if y'all noticed one of the Hmong or the Lao kind of getting, if they looked like they were rattled or anything, was there any taking them out of the battlefield or off the battlefield to get them looked at, or were they fighting for their everything? They needed every hand on deck.
Of course, SF are trainers. Basically, that's all we did when we were at Marble Mountain. We trained constantly, every day. We trained these troops that we had, and after we brought them back from that operation in Laos, we realized they needed severe training, and so we really upped the training. And we actually even put them through jump school, and jumped them right there on the compound at Marble Mountain. But we ran them. We gave them PT. These were just kids. I mean, there probably wasn't one over 20. And they were Chinese, known. And there's a picture of my squad somewhere. I'll probably send it to you one of these days. But they were just kids. And well, we gave them a lot of training. And, what are you going to do? You can't fire them. I mean, they're paid troops, and if they left us, the South Vietnamese army would scarf them up.
Oh, I think I've just found, sorry about this. I was looking at a Father B photo, and I think, yep, this is one you've taken, a whole nother one that we've just found. I was about to ask a question, but I've got to verify if this is Father B on the same mission.
Yeah, and I took that photo also. And that's
wow.
Leachai with the sunglasses. And and to Leachai's left, there is one of the really good medics, another Lao Tung or Kamu, good guy. I heard that he was killed by the communists after the takeover. Leachai got out, ended up in Wisconsin, and I used to visit him when he was there. In fact, I went to his funeral in Wisconsin. He died of an unusual cancer at a young age.
Like so many of y'all Vietnam and Laotian vets, maybe Agent Orange or what have you. But I'm glad to see this is looks like that same photo. Somebody's got, no, that's not your Car 15. That's an M16. Looks like a pump shotgun.
Yeah, that was my shotgun that I gave to Leachai. He loved that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
And
that's
HD2 radio, took 8 D cells.
I've never seen one like that before, and I was about to ask, is that a video camera?
No, it was pretty useless, but you could contact an airplane if it was right above you.
Boy, that those had to be some interesting trips in between the villages. You and Father B and that group out there. That's pretty cool. I had a few more pictures. We'll get this last question, and then we'll let you close it out with what you'd like to speak about. What was the biggest Hmong you ever saw? I guess he's alluding to your SOG time. Jason is alluding to.
Most of them were my size or younger, which is pretty short. I'm 5'6". But the tallest one I had on my squad was Nui, and I gave him the machine gun. And he was my machine gunner. And he was the one, the first one that was shot through the knee on my first operation in Laos. And he ended up with a fused knee, but he was a bright young kid and big and strong for a Chinese. They called themselves Nung, but the Nung were originally Kuomintang that moved down through Vietnam and were tough soldiers in the early years of SF. But these so-called Nung were Cholan Chinese, basically.
Cholan cowboys, as they like to call them.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, those early Nungs in the SOG early days were bad dudes. Not to say these younger guys wouldn't have been or weren't, but those early Nungs were bad dudes. I wanted to show the photo of you and Mr. VP, and also the Sheboygan Memorial, and we'll get ready to close it out. But that's a great photo of you and General Vang Pao.
I met with Vang Pao up in Minnesota and asked him to support that memorial, and he said he would, and talked about, we asked every Hmong to give $1 and be funded. And unfortunately, he never did anything to support it, mainly because it wasn't glorifying him and his officers. This was more of a memorial to all the soldiers that fought. And like I say, I was involved in that memorial from start to finish, and even helped build it because we had trouble with the contractors. So I was placing panels with suction cups and cementing them on. And so, again, I was involved with that and did raise a lot of money for it. I personally raised $35,000. And at one point, the city of Sheboygan said, we're not going to continue with this unless you guarantee that it'll be funded. So I had to write a letter saying that I would personally guarantee the rest of the money to build a memorial. And they accepted that. And of course, I didn't need it. We did raise the money. So.
Thank God. I'm glad. And that greatly disappoints me that Vang Pao, of course, he's known for being vain and what have you, but for him to not honor his men unless it had something to do with him, that's a big letdown. I believe this is the Sheboygan speech.
That was at the dedication in 2005. And again, I was the featured speaker then, and as I was last year.
That's amazing. What's that like, getting to speak to men you served with, the family members of men you served with, and their relatives, and getting to honor them? What's that like? I'm sure that's a huge moment for you, getting to do that.
A great honor, and I'll never forget it.
That's just amazing. I'm so glad you've been doing what you've been doing to get these brave men honored that you served with and came in contact with. And I'll show one more photo because this is historically interesting, because Ross Perot sent this to Burr Smith to give to Vang Pao. What a group of three names all converging together: Burr Smith, Ross Perot, and VP. That's hilarious. Pearl Handled Colt revolver sent as a gift by Ross Perot.
Again, I wrote about it in my book, but I met Ross Perot in Vientiane also, and he wanted to see if I could send some of my medics that were Sam Nua Hmong up to Sam Nua to see if they could find the caves where POWs were supposedly being held. And I just told him I couldn't send my medics up there. They'd be killed. And he had a paper bag with $20,000 in it, US, and offered it to me to pay these guys. And I just pushed it back to him. I said, I can't send my guys up there. But Ross Perot was a great guy. Again, another guy that you would never think was as humble and as nice a guy as he was. And he had a Special Forces team sergeant that sort of work with him, and maybe it was his bodyguard, but I can't think of his name. Another great guy, though. Yeah, so I knew Ross, and I'll say the very funny story about the first time I met VP and Burr Smith together. Again, it was in the book. And here I am, this dumb, young, 24-year-old hot shit. And I go up to Plain de Jars, which the Hmong had retaken, but it was still getting rocketed and mortared. And so first thing I do when anywhere, I go find the dispensary and the medic. And so I find where they're keeping the wounded, and it's a GP medium tent, just riddled with holes that look like Swiss cheese. And these wounded are laying on cots in this tent. And, I knew there were bunkers all around. I said, who the hell's in charge here? And why are these guys? So I go down to the bunker, and there's VP and Burr Smith having lunch. And I said, who the fuck's in charge here? And why the hell you've got wounded up there? This is VP and Burr Smith. I have no idea who they were.
I can only imagine what them looking up for their lunch at you. I bet if looks could kill, you would have been a dead man right there in that restaurant.
Yeah, VP never wouldn't even talk to me for the first couple of years I was in Laos after that. I mean, that was a huge blunder. They should have thrown me out of the country for that. But finally, he came around, and he actually gave me one of his rings, which I still have, which is that MR2 ring with a small diamond in it. And I still have that ring also.
Wow. Two, as you said, two just legendary, especially Mr. Burr Smith. He was another figure like Tony Poe, just legendary. Here's the PDJ.
Yeah.
And as you can see, while they call it the Plain de Jars, little, not little as we see, but literally look like jars.
They're big enough you could somebody could stand in there in those jars.
Wow. That is.
Some of them were as big as a Volkswagen Bug.
Yeah, I was about to say, these look like some of the smaller ones. I saw on another one that were quite huge. That's one of the interesting. I've got to get some more Laos books. I've got a few on my reading list, or my order list, that I'm waiting on to come in. But that was one of the neat parts to learn about, was the Plain de Jars and the amazing history of that area, and the combat history all through that area is amazing. And a lot of that is, again, it's covered in Mr. Steve's book. And a lot of the people he spoke about again today are in this book, and we didn't give a lot away. Don't want to give too much away, because if you haven't ordered this, it is SOG, his USAID work, his work with Bumping Into Vang Pao, Father B, just all kinds of great stuff. But before we close out for the day, I wanted to make sure you'd cover what you wanted to. Is there anything else you'd like to go over before we shut down for the day?
Basically, I wrote the book to honor the Hmong, and really, I'm just so impressed with what they've accomplished in this country in just basically 2 generations. They've done tremendous work. They're still very much clan oriented, and they've kept a lot of their customs, but they've also adapted. And one of the things about the Hmong is they never really would adapt. They kept their culture, even when the Chinese persecuted them all through Laos. When in Laos, they were considered second class or third class citizens. So they're very independent, but they've adapted well in this country and are doing great things. And I had talked earlier about Nia Her Lo, and Pop and I used to go spend the night with him and drink his corn whiskey. He came to this country as a penniless refugee. He worked hard. He put his kids through school. He had 6 kids. 1 became a teacher. 1 became a nurse. 2 are physicians, and 2 are lawyers.
Wow. That is unbelievable. The American dream right there. That. Wow.
Great family. And I spoke at Neher's funeral.
I'm so glad to see that you've been able to keep in such contact with all of your comrades and compatriots, because a lot of the guys we speak to are hear from, they've lost all contact even with American teammates, and it's very sad to know about that. We have connected some with some teammates, but it's very refreshing to know that you're plugged in as well as you are still with your men and everyone you knew. And it's as I said, it can only be a huge tip of the cap to you for you to be able to speak at these events to honor all these amazing warriors and their families. I can't imagine what that must feel like, and I'd love to see one in person and see the event, because I can only imagine how well it was in person to see filmed or otherwise. That's just outstanding. Um, yeah, I know we've learned a lot about the Hmong, and guys, as I said, there's a documentary on YouTube that PBS put out. It's pretty good, even though it's PBS, but they cover a lot of the struggle, a lot of important characters in the Hmong history. But if there's nothing else, I've covered my end. I just want to make sure you've covered yours and spoke as much as you would like.
One more thing. I sent you a picture of a young or an elderly Hmong in uniform who was taken at the memorial last year on Memorial Day. Do you have that photo?
Yes, let me go to
Anyway,
my
the photo
God.
was of me and Lo Vang, who was one of the senior medics. But before he came to work as a USAID medic, he was an Army medic. And when Tony Poe was wounded, this little guy, carried Tony Poe off the mountain. And his name is Lo Vang.
Well, of course, I cannot find it. I'm trying to. I may have to post it in a moment, unfortunately. Yep, I've messed it up. I did have it, but I've cleared off our photos. I will post that here momentarily just so people know. I apologize about that. Gosh. Um, yep, I don't have the photo. Apologize, guys. But yeah, I'll post that, and you're always welcome to join us again. We always love hearing about Laos, considering we don't get to hear much about it except for guys running in on missions and either being shot out or spending a few days. So we always enjoy getting to speak to someone who actually spent time there over a night period or a few days period. So if you're open to coming back whenever we get some more viewers and some more people wanting to hear about Laos, we'd love to have you back on to speak with us.
I was there for 59 months.
I got to write that down. I know it was a while, but I did not realize it was 59 months. Whew. Wow. Everybody's saying thank you. And again, thank you on our end from me as well. I always enjoy getting to speak with you and hear your history. We've got no more questions at the moment. And if you're satisfied, I think we'll shut her down for the day.
Thanks, bud. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And as I said, it's always a pleasure to get to speak to you. And I hope you have a good rest of your day, and I'll stay in touch with you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.